welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Guy Morris, author and researcher of Intelligent Action Thrillers, an expert on AI. He is a talented musician and composer. He has worked with companies, Occidental Petroleum. He pioneered adoption of early AI systems there, leadership roles as IBM, Oracle, and Microsoft, and many other companies. Welcome to the show, Guy.
Jay, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome to the show. You are welcome to India. Once again, in this online form, you have been to India, as you told me. So maybe this digital format presence, later on translates into something more. But what we are talking about is very important. So we will be talking about the future of AI. So first, to understand from you, Guy, the world seems to be divided on AI, and they talk about the future of AI. But when they talk about the future of AI, actually, I guess they are talking about the future of humanity. So in that aspect, I want to understand which side of the AI divide you are in.
Well, that's a complicated question to answer. On one, I've been in the technology field for decades, and AI is a very powerful tool, probably the most powerful tool that we've ever had since the introduction of personal computing, more so than the introduction of social media, more so than the introduction of smartphones. It will change humanity. It will change the economies of the world. It will have dramatic and meaningful impacts on all levels of society. That said, there are some dangers that are underspoken by many, that are covered up by some of the biggest companies in AI. And I start by telling people this to begin with. AI in and of itself is neither evil nor benign. It's a technology. And the biggest risk that we have with this power is who's going to use it, who's going to have that power, and what kind of impact that will have. No one of the $100 billion of investment just in the last 3 years alone, not one penny of that investment is going towards the salvation or for the good of humanity. It's going for every single one of those pennies. An investor is looking for a rate of return. And that's what we have to really understand here, is that this is more about money and power than it is about the good of humanity. And while there will be some good applications for artificial intelligence, there will also be some applications that we need to worry about. So when I really kind of look at the good and the bad, I'm more concerned with the things that we're not controlling well, as opposed to the things that we are controlling well. Now, I think if I can make one other general statement, when we talk about artificial intelligence, most people think of just as artificial intelligence as all the same thing. It's one size fits all. And there are actually multiple types of artificial intelligence. Some of them have more risk with them than others. And the easiest type is what we call artificial narrow intelligence. That's a very, very narrow type of intelligence designed for a very specific purpose. A great example of this is artificial intelligence designed to detect cancer cells in a CAT scan. And it does it faster and better than humans can. And there's many examples of artificial narrow intelligence that outperform human capabilities, and those could serve some good. Now, of course, somebody's going to have to pay for that, and it's going to almost always fall on the consumer to do that, the person who's sick that needs that support. Then there's a type of intelligence that we call artificial general intelligence. And the Chat GPT that came out last year from OpenAI, the Lambda computer from Google, and there's a number of examples of others that are coming out as we speak. There's hundreds of AIs on the market right now. Those have to do with general knowledge, the ability to communicate with humans, the ability to take language and transform it into a task. In language, they're based on large language models for the most part, and that language can be multilinguistic with multiple languages, including coding. So these are AIs that can actually code other AIs. And then there's an AI and that called integrated artificial intelligence, IAI. And that's what you would normally see in like a self-driving car, where you have multiple narrow intelligence working together in an integrated system to perform a larger task or function. And across the spectrum of AI, from commercial to medical to science to military to espionage, it's not necessarily what the AI can do today, and there are some risks moving in the near future, but there's nothing to keep a malicious individual or government or corporation from creating a malicious AI. And in fact, the current version of GPT-4 that creates ChatGPT is now got a malicious form called Worm GPT, sold exclusively on the dark web and designed exclusively to create malicious code. So when we think about ChatGPT, that is based on roughly about 1 trillion neural data points, and that has an IQ of roughly 155, which is only 5 points less than Einstein. So it's already smarter than most humans on the planet. The next version of GPT-5, ChatGPT just being one version of that, will have closer to 100 trillion neural data points and will be at least 100 times more intelligent than the current level of GPT. So we're within 12 months of having a super intelligence, smarter in many ways than any other intelligence individual on the planet. And honestly, no matter how many times I hear an executive tell me they know they can control that, I'm not convinced that they necessarily will know how to start controlling an intelligence that can code another intelligence and smarter than they are. So we have a number of layers of AI, and so they range from things that could be serve really good purposes, things that are like lethal autonomous weapons that are being developed by the US and China primarily that could serve really bad purposes. And then we have criminal elements in between. And so to say, am I for or against AI is a complicated question because there's answers for both sides.
Absolutely, absolutely. I get it, and I thank you for explaining this thing. Different sort of AIs in such a detailed manner, Guy. And I've learned quite a few of things from here, and there is so much to learn. Now, you yourself said that it is about money and power to a large extent, and
Yes.
that they talk about many other things, but that is yet to be seen. So it will largely be a game of money and power. So,
Well, that's absolutely right. Now, a company called a big investment firm, one of the biggest in the Americas, called Goldman Sachs, produced a study about, I guess it was about 4 or 5 months ago now, that indicated their estimate was that between now and 2030, AI would displace as many as 300 to 500 million jobs. That's a lot of jobs being displaced at a time when we're also going to see a drastic economic demographic change where the retirement age, the population is going to reach retirement age, which is going to shrink the working class, the population. And those are unlike most previous industrial revolutions and technologies that displaced mainly lower skill level jobs. AI is going to be replacing medical technicians and engineers and lawyers and software engineers and designers and management and a number of what our core middle class is made of. And I'm not sure what the tax basis is in India, but I know in the United States, that's the core of our tax revenues. So if we take a big whack out of that core of our tax revenues, we're not only going to see a number of hugely important jobs displaced, but we're going to basically decimate our tax revenue base as a result of it. So it has longer term economic implications as well as trade implications, um, uh, greater unemployment, greater homelessness. And so while all of that's happening, you'll see a few companies, you'll probably get probably about 12 companies, 15 companies worldwide that have the dominant share of some of these markets that will become wealthy beyond imagination.
Okay, it almost sounds like a conspiracy guy.
Not a conspiracy. If you look at the economics, there's a book called from a guy named Peter Zeihan who studies geopolitics and geoeconomics. I have a master's in economics. I wrote a macroeconomic model that outperformed the Federal Reserve, and that got me into grad school. And so I have a pretty good understanding of economics. And so the demographic issue is certainly a worldwide issue. It's going to happen in almost every country. It's going to happen in China, the United States, Europe, Asia, even India to a lesser extent because your population is still in the growth curve. But there will be a number of countries. Europe is going to be really hit hard. Germany is going to be hit hard. Japan will be hit hard by the demographic change. So, and I'm not the one studying the fact that, as I said, Goldman Sachs was the company, and this is a large investment firm that has already published that they predict as many as 300 to 500 million jobs will be displaced. So I just simply start putting the numbers together and start looking at what the economic implications are, and what would happen if that many jobs were displaced in that short of a period of time. Too short for people to really be retrained into new careers that maybe aren't affected by as much by AI. You're looking at some pretty dramatic ramifications, implications just from those numbers. So I'm not necessarily building a conspiracy theory. I'm simply putting together documented facts and drawing out the logical conclusions of how those facts are going to lay out.
Absolutely, absolutely. You are not building anything, but it is I as an individual see it that there are different meanings and interpretations than what is being told by some of the powerful people related to artificial intelligence, as well
Well,
as yeah. In terms of Mr. Hinton, he's a godfather of AI, if I remember.
he's a very
Musk,
smart man. They're
Elon
one of the
Musk,
people I
Sam
follow. Yeah.
Altman itself, they themselves, people who are closely related to AI, they themselves are warning of the dangers of it, and they want the halt to be there. They have requested governments to at least halt it for some time. Here it is about, we are talking about next generation, third generation, fourth generation. I don't know what level we are talking about.
Well, and to be fair, and Jeffrey Hinton is one of the people that I follow closely. Mo Gadot, who is the former chief business officer of Google, has also been very public about his concerns as well. In fact, one of the characters in my books is loosely based on Jeffrey Hinton, and so. And so I've been aware of the trends for quite some time, and they are accelerating much faster than we had anticipated. And there are a number of concerns. Now, I would put the risks of AI into two categories. One is the technology itself and what we can and cannot control. And then the other one is the use cases, who's using it and for what purposes, and what kind of controls we have on there. When I've looked at the regulation frameworks that both the European Union and the United States and others are starting to look at, they're looking primarily at some of the commercial applications to get rid of biases, to get rid of, to address privacy issues, to address creative rights issues, to create sort of competition barriers between countries, so that for example, I know that one of the goals of the regulations in the United States is to keep the United States as one of the leaders in at the expense of China, for example. And so the regulations are meant to really, in a certain sense, the people who have been asking for regulations are doing so because of the competitive edge. But you'll notice that they're not necessarily stopping their own development, because they're afraid to, if they do that, the other guy's going to get ahead of them. And so we see this competitive race, not only between companies, but between countries. And so that competitive race is because there's so much money involved. A company called Price Waters Coopers and um, um, Price Water Coopers, as a big accounting firm, they've estimated that by 2030, AI could add as much as 15 trillion to the global economy. Now, that's 15 trillion for the companies that are really controlling and using that AI, making the products out of that AI that they'll benefit from. And so there's a lot of money involved. And I don't know about your sense of history, but my study of history has indicated that when there's that kind of money involved, people will downplay the risks that are involved in that money. So even all of these companies like Elon Musk, who once said a few years ago that AI is summoning the demon, has invested billions into developing his own AI. Well, he's less afraid of the demons than he is of losing out on some of the payback. And so we have a very strong financial motive for many of these companies to downplay even though they're talking about the risk, they're talking primarily about the economic and the competitive and social risks, not necessarily the risks of AI itself. When we look at the technology piece of this, so I mentioned a minute ago that the GPT 3.5 to GPT 4 increased the intelligence of that platform, and that's just one platform, by well over tenfold. And that happened over 6 months. GPT-5 will increase it between 100 to maybe even as much, some have heard some estimates as much as 1,000 times over GPT-4. By the time we get into GPT 6, 7, and 8, which will be happening between 25 and 26, 2025 to 2027, we'll be looking at intelligent platforms that are anywhere from 3,000, as I've heard estimates, as much as 5,000 times more intelligent than any human on the planet. And we believe that we can control that, but we don't necessarily know what that means. And I have heard some executives be honest and say that they really don't know, that they really can't see what the world would look like beyond 3 years because of this rapid growth. Now, the other combination, the other factor that isn't talked about as much is the combination of when we start, and we've already started seeing companies doing this. There are about 20-ish, 25 companies globally that are actively working on taking that super intelligence and creating a consciousness to that intelligence. And that'll happen when we start combining binary AI with quantum computing. So when I first wrote the book Swarm, the most powerful quantum computer on the planet was the D-Wave 10, which had about 100 qubits. Now, without going and confusing everybody as to why a qubit is different from a bit and going into entanglement and superpositioning of quantum technology and quantum engineering, a qubit at that point, a qubit could do about 10 quadrillion calculations per hour. What would take a supercomputer roughly 10,000 years to calculate, they had tests that can prove that the 100 qubit quantum computer could do it in about 200 seconds. Now, this year, we have a quantum computer of roughly 433 qubits, which is not 4 times the old one, but more like 400 times more powerful than the old one. By 2024, early 2025, IBM has committed to having an 1,100 plus qubit quantum computer. So when we start combining the absolute incredible power of quantum computing to run through the calculations in addition to a superintelligence, we really are dealing with a power that we don't know. Now, there's an old saying that says power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. AI will be the absolute power of all absolute powers, more powerful in many ways, so that some of these AI and technology companies will be more powerful or as powerful in some ways than most governments. That is not something that we know how to control. And so that presents not only a technology risk, but a social risk as well.
Absolutely, Guy. Absolutely. And that is what I was coming to, that this development on AI, about AI, it will, I guess, the danger is that it might be more powerful than many most powerful nations of the world. It may be, 10 or 15 companies, as you said, may be controlling the way humanity governs itself in under any system of governments, whether
Yeah.
it is, but the biggest threat is about democracy itself. And maybe we will have a, and second thing is, earlier we used to talk about nuclear deterrent even among countries. I guess it will be what AI will act as the next sort of a deterrent, where you don't, because you will have the power without any moving anything, you will be controlling other nations.
Well, and if you think about a computer virus. Now consider some of the computer viruses that have hit the world over the last 10 years have been devastating. They brought many companies down for days. They brought down governments. They brought down a number of things. Now imagine a super intelligent artificial intelligence based malicious virus that was designed specifically to break down the internet, for example. That would be extremely difficult to get ahead of, because as we develop patches to try and counter this, it could be moving and thinking ahead of that and basically countering those moves. So we're dealing with the ability to create malicious software that could, now if you take down the internet, you're going to take down commerce, you're going to take down news, you're going to take down banking, you'll take down information, you'll take down communications. So much of our society now is centered around this technical heartbeat of the internet globally, that if I could attack someone's internet, if I could attack their satellite system, I can destabilize a country to the point where it wouldn't be more than a matter of weeks before they would be the internal strifes would be so difficult that it would be an easy target on a military level. Then we get into the military applications, which I know I've heard people talk about killer robots. I'm less concerned about killer robots than I am concerned with AI-driven killer viruses, either both on a technology level or as a biological level, as well as AI killer drones, which are already in development and testing. And my book Swarm was based on a technology that's currently being developed in the US about a killer drone swarming technology. And my understanding, the best I can determine, it's a little bit harder to get the information, is that China's working on the very same technology. So imagine 10,000 18-inch drones swarming through your city. Every one of them has high-speed cameras. Every one of them can do facial recognition. Every one of them can basically have infrared technology to find out if you're carrying a gun and decide if you're a target or any danger. And all of them are basically weaponized with either explosives or some sort of firing mechanism. That was the kind of thing that's being designed so that they can clear villages of combatants without having to bomb the village to oblivion. So there might be a good reason for it, but it makes it for a very terrifying and almost indefensible type of weapon. Which gets to another point, which is AI is not perfect. We know we have lots of examples of AI being super smart, but also making mistakes. Making mistakes in history, making mistakes with the facts, misdiagnosing something. We see self-driving cars stop in the middle of an intersection because one of those narrow AIs has malfunctioned somehow and misinterpreted the information it's getting, and it's basically shut down the entire thing. So to believe that this drone swarming technology could never fail, could always operate as intended, is wishful thinking. And so we're dealing with a level of technology, and what I tell people, and I've heard others, Mo Gadot, say the same thing, which was not reassuring, but at least it confirmed my thinking, is that with nuclear technology, which was the most devastating technology ever created by man up to this point, we control the intellectual property very tightly at an international level. We control the materials to create a nuclear bomb very tightly at an international level. And we control even the people who understand this technology at a very tight level. And while there are criminals and there are ways to get around it in some ways, we see North Korea, for example, Iran, we see this technology leaking out because of partnerships with other countries. It's been fairly well contained, and everyone in the world agreed we didn't want to let this get out of hand. Right now, at an international level, there are zero controls over the technology, the intellectual property, the computers, the microchips, or any of the other mechanisms for a malicious, anybody with enough money to basically to create a malicious AI platform. The other thing that's different from nuclear technology is even the best bomb that we've ever created couldn't go out and create another bomb. We now have AI that's been coded, that's learned how to code and learn how to basically create other AI and train other AI. And so we've got something now, a destructive type of mechanism that with enough intelligence, that could develop its own motives and goals, combining that with quantum computing, because our brains work at a quantum level as well, by the way. And there's been a number of neurological studies to confirm that. We now have a potential neurologically conscious intelligence that can create another neurologically conscious intelligence, and we don't necessarily know what goals it would have. I also try and tell people that up until now, all of our training on artificial intelligence has been training that artificial intelligence in what I would call an alpha male mentality. We're training it to optimize, to increase targets, to increase performance, to increase accuracy. It's all about the metrics, the types of intelligence that produce higher profits, more control, better performance. But humanity, if we look to who we are as humans, there's always a spiritual side and there's always an emotional intelligence. We've learned through millions of years of evolution that empathy, compassion, understanding, forgiveness, mercy are essential in order for communities and and society to function. Nobody, because they're all thinking about the money aspect, nobody is really training AI on any of those issues, much less ethics and legality. And so we don't necessarily know, and it's happening so fast. So as I've mentioned, we're going to go from a GPT-4 to a GPT-5 framework in less than 12 months, maybe 18 at the very outside, but it's going so fast. We went from 6 months to go from 3.5 to 4.0. And so my concern is that it's already too late, that we've already let a lot of this intelligence and a lot of this momentum, a lot of these investments, a lot of the laboratories scattered all around the world, in China, in Russia, in Iran, in the United States, in Europe, and in India, and everywhere, working on these things to slow them all down to the point where we can figure out how to control these issues. And while there was a universal call for that control, not one company, not one country heeded that call and to stop the development because they're afraid that somebody else is going to get ahead of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Guy, let not the governments have not done anything. As you said, we have. It's already too late. As individuals, then, how do we protect ourselves? How do we remain to be human in this tremendous onslaught that is going to
That's a
come
great
in the coming
question.
days?
The first thing I tell people is that the first wave of job losses, the first thing a man's going to worry about is, can I provide for my family? And is there going to be an AI that will replace me? Eventually, yes. But the first wave of those job losses will be to people. Now, I don't know about you. You look a little younger than me, perhaps so. But I remember when we first started introducing computers and personal computers into the business environment. There were those people who said, I don't like these new computers. That's not how I've done things in the past. I don't want to have to learn this new thing. I don't want to have to learn how to type. I have a secretary for that. The people who didn't want to learn the new tools were the first ones to be replaced. And they were replaced by people who were doing much the same job, but they were using the new tools to do it. And so the first thing that I would tell people is to get over the natural fear and resistance to this change and learn the tools relative to your profession, right? Get good at them. Learn how to use Chat GPT. Find the tools of your designer. Learn how to work with DALI 2. If you're and there's hundreds of applications. I could I have a list of them, but I can't remember them all. But get good at the tools that you're going to need to use for your profession. That'll at least keep you informed as to what's going on. Then the second thing I tell people is that this is a this in many ways is a spiritual and personal choice of how do we deal with a world that's going to change that rapidly, that much, that quickly. And I liken it to somebody whose doctor has come to them and said, you have a terminal illness, and I can't tell you when, but you've got maybe 10 years to live in the way that you're used to living, and you might have a period where you're going to live in a very unhappy condition. But it's about making the choices today about what really matters. Yeah, family over friends, spirituality, um, enjoying the things of life that are worth enjoying, not worrying so much about the wealth and the building and some of these other things that will be challenged naturally by not only the demographic changes and the economic changes that will happen regardless of AI, but how AI will accelerate that curve. That we shouldn't live our lives worrying about things we can't control. And so one of the things I tell everybody is take this as an opportunity to reevaluate what's really important to you and focus on that. And for many people, it'll be their family. For others, it'll be their faith. For others, it'll be seeing the world or enjoying life, learning a sport, learning a musical instrument, learning how to paint, finding an artistic expression, finding that balance in life that they need in order to feel whole and feel spiritually connected to others. That's going to be more important as some of these other changes happen than trying to worry about what we can't control. And I think it is an out of control situation. AI will happen. There's absolutely nothing we can do that's going to stop it now. It's going to go faster, and the better it gets, the more money is going to get invested. The more money invested and the more powerful it'll become. That power will bleed into banking. That'll bleed into governments. That'll bleed into surveillance. That'll bleed into policing. It'll bleed into every aspect of our life. But what I tell people too is but AI is only good, can only see you where it has a connected device. Go
Yes.
camping, get away from the city, get away from the cameras, go to the beach, learn how to go diving, learn how to enjoy those aspects of the world we've been so focused into cities the last 50 years that it's time for us to basically figure out that, well, if I leave my phone at home so it doesn't have a way of tracking me, if I can get out of that cell signal and I can go learn how to take my family and learn how to enjoy life, I can break free. Even for little bits of time, I can break free of that sense of a camera watching me all the time. And I don't know, most people don't know this. Most people do know that China is perfecting a citizen surveillance system that watches everything you do, watches every phone call you accept. If you accept a phone call from a person who's got a lower citizen social score than you, it lowers your social score. And if you're walking across the street and you jaywalk, that can lower your social score. They're perfecting this dominant authoritarian control surveillance system in China. they've already sold parts of that or all of that type of system to over 40 countries. So the ability for other countries to try and control their populace as we go through these dramatic social changes is increasing. When we see social changes, that's all these kind of changes, that's always going to raise the possibility of social upheaval. That's the history of man. That's the way we've always been. It's not avoidable. And so it's important that we as individuals be very centered, that we're not induced into that level of hyperbole and violent thinking. That this is our chance to create. Now, I'm a Christian. This is my chance to deepen my personal Christian faith. For people who are Islam or Muslim or Hindi or Baha'i or Buddhist, this is your chance to deepen that and to really root deeply in that, so that when the turmoil comes, and it will come from all of these things, as well as climate change and population as pollution and other changes, political changes that are creating more authoritarian governments than we're used to in our lifetime when democracy was on the rise. We're going to see democracy challenged to a great extent. It's important, as I said, I tell people it's not about what's going to go on outside that's really going to matter in the long run for each of us. It's going to matter what's going on inside.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is much to talk. There is much to understand. There is much to, for you to look into the future and tell us what it's going to be. But this is just one episode. This is a topic which needs several episodes, and so we will, just keep it to this at this point in time. But for sure, we will do several more episodes to understand this whole thing about AI, the future of AI, and the future of humanity. Let's see who outlasts each other.
Yeah.
So, be that as it may, people who want to know more about you, more from you, what is the best way for them to connect with you? And also those people who would like to more about your books, buy your books, engage with you professionally, what's the best way and the quickest way?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that my first book, Swarm, won the Gold Award from Reader's Favorite 2 years ago. The sequel to that, called The Last Ark, just won the Silver Award a few weeks ago. So all my books have been very well received. You can go to GuyMorrisBooks.com is the easiest place to get a hold of me. It has my bio. It has you can communicate with me directly from the website. You can look up reviews for the books. You can get some of the fact versus fiction. So when I'm writing my books and I'm talking about facts about AI versus what I write as fiction, I'm very transparent. But I want you to read the book first before you go read that stuff, because it makes the book a lot more fun. And if you want to buy the books, it gives you links to Amazon, Barnes & Noble online, about a dozen other books to get an ebook form. And so they should be widely distributed digitally. And that's the best place to, I think, learn. If you want to have a way of learning about AI in a fun way that's not dystopic or overly techy, my books try to create scenarios of how AI could go wrong, but do it in a way that leaves you with a positive feeling, with great characters you love to follow. They have wit, they have warmth, they have humanity, and it gives you that balance of a way of looking at these things in a balanced way. So the books are a great way to do it. And if you want to just talk to me about the work and just get my opinions on AI and what's going on, I typically will respond to emails as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you said, that AI or any of these things are dependent on they connecting with you. The day you decide to connect with yourself and disconnect that for a bit, you will find a new connection with yourself, and it will be also perhaps the beginning of a new connection with humanity. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.